To understand the art projects of Sixtus IV, you need to know about the social and historical reality of Italy around 1470 to 1480. Italy, you'll remember, was not unified. It was divided. It was a mixture of republican oligarchies, Florence, Siena, Lucca, Venice, and Genoa, and territories ruled by a prince, the lord of a land, including Milan, Savoy, Urbino, and Mantua. Rome was ruled by the Pope, who was a religious ruler and political commander. In this world of regional factionalism, of division, there were frequent invasions, battles to seize control of other territories. Florence and other republican cities had to be constantly on guard against invasion by dukes such as the Duke of Milan. These invasions happened often. In this unstable political environment, rulers competed to seize and maintain power. Part of having power is projecting it, is showing your authority and power. So rulers used art to create their public image as someone who deserves to rule, who ought to command respect, who should be honored for his magnificence, before whom others should submit. Just as there were conduct manuals for courtiers, there were also advice books for rulers. The most famous is Machiavelli's The Prince, which is written in Florence circa 1513, a little bit later than Sixtus IV, but it still is a good example of the ideas behind how to rule, how to be an authority and a figure of power. The consensus among these advice books was that the prince must project majesty. The quality of majesty was supposed to be the essential ingredient that made everyone believe this guy deserves to be top dog, big man, the one on top. Majesty legitimized the ruler's right to rule. So conduct manuals for princes, like those for courtiers, emphasize things to avoid. Don't, I'm quoting some of these conduct manuals right now about the prince, the proper behavior for a prince. Don't drink excessively. You can't be majestic if you do that. Don't eat gluttonously. That ruins your majesty. Don't walk jerkily. Don't guffaw with laughter. Okay, laughing too loud and vigorously gets in the way of having majesty. So I'm clearly never going to be an Italian Renaissance ruler. Don't toss your head nervously, whinnying like a horse. So in addition to these forms of behavior, majesty had to be conveyed physically, in clothing, in speech, and very much in the spatial environment of a prince's courtly household. And for all of this, art was absolutely necessary. Art would create the environment of majesty that would cement authority. So here in this painting, you see Pope Sixtus IV looking very majestic. And the architecture, the space in which he is seated contributes to, enhances, and magnifies that majesty. The architecture follows Brunelleschi's classicizing style with round arches, the curves and the squares, the clear measured units of space, although it is now gaudily decorated in a way that Brunelleschi would not have approved of. For Sixtus IV, the glamour of all these rich marbles, the colored decorations, the gilded ceiling, all of this goes to enhance his majesty. And what we'll see is that Sixtus IV needed to enhance his majesty. And that's why he is so interested in art. So Sixtus IV begins a Sistine Chapel project that is really going to wind up being a two-part process, over 50 years. And it is begun with frescoes that Sixtus has painted on the side walls here. It's going to continue with his successor, Pope Julius II, getting this guy named Michelangelo to do the stuff on the ceiling. But let's back up, because the reason that Sixtus wants to pay artists like Perugino, and Botticelli also worked on this project, is because He inherited a Rome that was in terrible shape. When Sixtus IV became Pope in 1471, Rome was just beginning to recover from a state of ruin, which had begun during what's called the Great Schism of the 1300s. That's when the Pope went into exile in Avignon, France. Remember that power struggle between the Pope and the French king resulted in moving the papacy into France. This devastated Rome's economy, which relied almost exclusively on pilgrimage. The city's economy basically collapsed. So by the time that the popes returned to Rome, their territory, their city, is the opposite of majestic. Pope Martin, predecessor to Pope Sixtus IV, wrote in 1420 about the condition of the city. I'm quoting him. Houses had fallen into ruins. Churches had collapsed. Whole quarters were abandoned, and the town was neglected and oppressed by famine and poverty. In fact, things were so bad that he actually issued a papal decree telling the inhabitants of Rome that they had to stop doing the following. Stop throwing and illicitly hiding entrails, guts, that is, viscera, more guts, heads, feet, bones, blood, and skins, besides rotten meat and fish, refuse, excrement, and other fetid and rotting cadavers into the streets. So a city with heads, feet, bones, rotted meat and fish, and excrement is not really going to assert majesty, supremacy, and legitimacy. And so what you're seeing in this project is a trend of popes harnessing art to re-beautify Rome and re-glamorize the papacy itself.